The United States fans are out there cheering the 4 Americans, and that's where we're going to. The Alp, 131 miles. It's the second longest stage of this year's set. There is the beauty of the Alps as we course towards the start of the big ones, the Col de Galibier. 151 riders have made it thus far, the 180. 7 of the 20 teams are still riding with all 9 men. That's quite an honour for those guys. It's a beautiful day here in France, 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Oh, that registers at 21 Celsius. It's sunny, you can see that blue skies, and a light wind is blowing. And we know in the Alps there are an awful lot of people waiting to see the riders from the Tour. This is the Peloton. You can see there is a time gap of nearly 5 minutes. 4 riders got away today, 3 kilometres in. Ruben Perez, Stefan Schumacher, Peter Velitz and Remy Di Gregorio, and they're leading. Nobody bothered to chase them yet, Paul. We've gone through the lovely town of Briançon, but in the far distance now are the slopes of the Col de Lotteret, which you know lead on to the Galibier.
Absolutely, we're right in the very start of the Col de Lotteret, Phil. It's a long drag to begin with, climbs up for about 20 kilometres. Once you get to the summit of the Lotteret, you take a right-hand turn, and then the Galibier starts in earnest. The 5 riders at the front of the race here, Perez, Schumacher, Velitz and Di Gregorio, are not really a threat in any way to the overall race that we're witnessing. There are 4 riders there, as you can see, and a little bit further back, Phil, at almost 5 minutes, is the front end of the main field. Team CSC have gone to the front end of the main field. They're setting a very hard pace, and the idea is to make the race tougher to try and split it up later on. And it looks like Schumacher's trying to soften them up for Bernard Cole, his team leader in second overall. He was the last to join 3 rides, took him a few kilometres, but he caught them up. Well, it's a crosswind at the moment, Paul, but they will turn into a headwind. It might spoil the fun in some ways, because I don't think that will split them if it does become a full block head. No, I don't think it will. I'm not expecting any real aggression, Phil, really, until we get to the Col de la Croix de Fer, because that is a beast of a climb. It starts off steep, levels off a fraction in the minute, and then afterwards it goes straight on up to a height of just in excess of 2,000 metres. That's where I really believe the race will start to get tough. At the moment, we're just going through a softening process. Well, there's a Luxembourg flag over on the left. I think it's actually a regional flag, but it's the one they're all flying. 9 kilometres to the actual top, so we're closing in on the right-hand turn here as the 4 leaders are coming up. And Peter Velitz, who's setting the pace at the front, I mean, he's only 24 years of age, and he must be frightened to death now. He's never done the Tour de France before. And you see, they are calling it the Col du Lotteret now, or they were telling us the distance up the Col de Galibier, but the Lotteret now goes down, and these boys go right, and we continue to go up. Here comes the turn. That's the turn of this corner now, Phil, indicating 9 kilometres to the summit of the Galibier, and yes, they could have gone straight over the top, and in about 25 kilometres they could have been at the start of the Alpe d'Huez. However, we're not taking the easy route here this afternoon. Interesting to note the speed, 11.2 miles an hour. We're heading for the snow line now. That is the glacier on the opposite side of the road, because pulling back, that is the Col du Lotteret. We must be with the Peloton. There they are, Stuart O'Grady and Nicky Sorensen still riding their hearts out here, trying to put their leaders in the best possible position today to cross swords with the likes of Denny Menchoff, Cadell, Evans, primarily, and Bernard Cole, the Austrian rider, who many of the commentators here call the man from Germany, but he's very much an Austrian, and they're very proud of him. Well, in fact, there was a scramble at the last minute, Phil, for the Austrian television to get themselves set up for the commentary positions here, because they hadn't planned to cover the Tour de France at all this year. Then at the last minute they thought, uh-oh, we've got a man who might win this bike race overall, so we'd better get ourselves sorted out. And a scramble got them into position for yesterday and today, and they'll be back at the weekend on Saturday and Sunday as well to cover the final time trial and of course the last day on the Champs-Élysées. Well, he's had a great ride, and he looks as though he's going to finish strongly on Alpe d'Huez, because he rode so well yesterday, did Cole. Well, I have a feeling yesterday, Phil, he didn't actually go out on the attack because of the downhill to the finish line in Jauziers. He was just thinking, well, if he took a 30-second or a minute advantage, he wouldn't be able to keep it on the downhill to the finish. But the difference is, at the summit of the Alpe d'Huez here, there is no downhill. It finishes right at the top of the climb on the finish line. So if you're a climber, you can pull back a minute or a minute and a half on a climb like this. It's his second Tour de France for Bernard Cole. He finished 31st unnoticed in his first tour, but now he's racing for a second place overall. By the way, it's a chimney sweep when he's not a professional cyclist.
It's worth remembering that Maurice Garin, the first winner of the Tour de France in 1903, that was his profession as well. Look through the tunnels here as we still climb for the Peloton, the climb of the Col du Lauterey, and they too will shortly be heading up. That's the Glacier de la May, which Paul told you about earlier. So we're looking over at the glacier. The riders themselves will be feeling a bit warmer because they're about to continue their climb up the Galibier.
It really is a magnificent backdrop for any kind of bike race in the world. The Alps this afternoon are magnificent. There's not a cloud in the sky, and everybody is waiting for a big battle, a final, maybe important battle in the Tour de France this year to try and define who will finally have a chance of winning this bike race overall. Because even last night, Phil, when we looked at it, there was no chance of deciding who was going to win.
Well, as we look at the glacier, the workload pretty evenly spread. The man seems to be working the hardest on our computer is Stefan Schumacher, but 27% for him. Peter Velitz, Di Gregorio 26%, and the other rider Perez 22%. That was the work rate of those four light riders. But he's actually very confident, is Christian van der Velde, and he's still got a chance of a high finish because he's a very good time trialist. If he doesn't lose too much time today, he can still dream of a big finish, because on Saturday is a very hard time trial indeed. I just can't get over this magnificent man from Adelaide, Stuart O'Grady, Paul. The way he taps out these rhythms, he just sits there like a metronome and just rides his bike.
Well, that's all he does. He gets fixed into his mind, I'm going to set this pace. He looks at his onboard computer every now and again and tries to lock in at a specific pace, and currently he's locked in at around about 11.5 miles an hour. You can see from the flags of all of the countries who've come to support the riders in the Tour de France this afternoon that there is a fairly strong wind that's going to batter the riders, Phil, on the slopes of the Col du Galibier. That's the summit there of the Col de Lauterey, but now, for me, this is when the climbing starts to get a little bit tougher. The Col du Galibier.
And it's open, what a relief.
Fortunately.
As the riders start the slopes. Well, you know, 4 weeks ago this could well have been closed, this road, because the snow is very slow to clear at 2,645 metres. And I'm sure once we get up there, we're going to see the snow around the shoulders of the riders.
See David Miller, the British rider, and Garmin Chipotle not far away from the front end of the main field, so maybe he's managed to get Christian van der Velde up through the outside of the confusion there to place him ideally in the front 15 to 20 riders on the early slopes of the Col du Galibier.
Shoulder, these are the four leaders down there. They probably can see the long caravan of the Tour de France, because just over the shoulder of Schumacher was that right-hand turn.
Well, it's a long way down into the valley. It really is a magnificent climb, especially when you see the Tour de France on a day like this.
Look at that.
That is a mountain. That is a climb in the Tour de France. That is what the legends of the Tour de France are written about.
Well, we can commentate on the Tour every year, and you can never get tired of such a view as that. Massive crowd lining all of the last sets of the Col du Galibier, and the steady progress of the Tour de France on our left-hand side there.
Well, if you just look to the bottom of the picture, you can see the main peloton. If you look to the top, you can see the cars moving along the top line there, and that's the difference that separates the main field from the breakaway group of four riders, and that's probably around about 2.5 kilometers distance, Phil, on this climb.
Oh, 5 minutes and 16 seconds, whichever comes first. Now, because this looks as though Romain Feliu, 124, is beginning to struggle. He was off the back. There's 5,000 euros for the souvenir Henri Desgrange at the top of this climb, because Henri Desgrange is the man who was responsible for the first Tour de France in 1903, and they always give a special memory prize in his memory. 5,000 euros is a lot of money, and well, they're packing them in down there, aren't they? But they must be the only things that aren't interested in the passage of the Tour de France right now.
Well, I have to say,
it's almost in the shape of France, that, isn't it?
It almost is, and I don't know how they managed to do that. I have a friend who wrote to me the other day and said, I've really enjoyed the cheeses and the wines that we've been going through in France. He said, but can't we have a little look at the livestock? Well, there you go, there's some sheep.
Well, that's amazing. I can't believe they asked the sheep to stand in the map of France. That can't be true, surely. As we look out across here, now watch the riders on the Col du Galibier. The sheep are responsible for keeping that grass down, and there is the Tour de France. This is the barren slopes here of the Galibier, There's the toiling peloton. The pace just right for a lot of people, it seems, at the moment. And the reason being, of course, we're heading to the Col de Croix de Fer, which is 30 kilometres long, much steeper, much narrower. Usually a big crowd on the Alp. We're certainly going to get a decision, I think, on the Croix de Fer, and those leaders will go to the Alp. Well, the headwind might be ruining the attacks here, or any planned attacks at the moment, Paul. There's no doubt Romain Velitz, who took the lead at Nantes and held it for a day, is in trouble. There he is, 124. His teammate just in front of him there is Freddy Bichou, who's also had a pretty good Tour de France as well.
Yes, I think Team Agri-Toubel have had an awful lot out of the Tour de France. They've been very close to getting themselves glory, especially with Romain Velitz, who was on a couple of occasions very close, Phil, to actually winning a stage. And let's not forget, he did get himself the yellow jersey in the first week of the Tour, which for him was extremely important.
It was brilliant for him, it was brilliant for France, it was what the Tour needed as far as the French were concerned. Big cheers from the spectators here, even though they support a French team that's not represented in this breakaway, Vojkler. They're going to shout these riders to the summit of the Tourmalet, listen, of the Col de Galibier. And there's the Scottish flag there, looking for David Miller. Well, he's in there, in the centre of the pack right now.
By the way, this is one of the famous passes in the Alps, which for many years has been used not only by travellers but also by armies as they travelled, whether it was from Italy into France or across up towards Austria. It was first used in the Tour de France on the 10th of July 1911, and I'm sure you knew that.
No, I didn't. I'm always relieved that you can know all these things, to be honest. But it's the second highest pass compared with the Col d'Iseron, which is over by Val d'Isère when you get onto that one.
Yep, that is in the Great Alps, and it certainly is. The Col d'Iseron, by the way, is 2,770 metres. We're once we go over the summit of the climb here of the Col de Galibier, we actually drop into the department of the Savoie.
It's one of my favourite departments of France, for sure, on the borders there with Switzerland. But now the peloton, you see, they are riding quite quickly, but they're not breaking the peloton up, which indicates that this is not putting too many people into difficulty today, the Galibier. But with what lies ahead, they don't want to commit suicide on the first ascent, because the next two are going to hurt even more than this one. Narrow climb on the Croix de Fer, and usually big crowds towards the summit as the riders start the climb here. 5:41 the gap, 134. And Remy Gregorio, the guy at the back here, is doing a lot of work. He's a very good climber, and he rode extremely well yesterday on the Pyrenees on the Col de Tourmalet on Bastille Day.
When we keep getting the amount of work that's being done, Phil, in fact, strangely enough, it's De Gregorio who seems to be doing the least amount of work to the success of this breakaway. Now, I feel in the back of my mind what he's probably thinking about is forward to the Col de la Croix de Fer, because he's looking, I think, for a long raid through the mountains. He believes that France can get themselves another big mountain victory. Another little interesting statistic, yesterday was only the 20th stage win by the French in the last 10 years.
Yes, it was. 133 kilometres to go. Second longest stage, do not forget, of the Tour de France today. They couldn't have chosen a more harder route, I don't think, as the riders continue. Hand up there, and that is Marcus Berghardt of Team Columbia. Probably wants a drink at this stage of the race. And there are the barren summits, which we don't have a road up, which is rather thankful for the riders in the Tour de France. Little problem for Ruben Perez here, tries to hold tempo. Look at that flag up front there that whips across from the left. I guess Schumacher stealing the points to stop anybody else getting them, because of his teammate Cole is the leader in this competition.
Yes, he also probably, Phil, wants the glory of getting 5,000 euros into his back pocket as well as they accelerate up towards the top. De Gregorio, you might have noticed him there just taking on board a newspaper. That's because he'll put that up his shirt, and that helps prevent him getting too cold on the downhill. Schumacher is not letting anybody challenge him here as he goes over the top, first of all to take maximum points, but probably more importantly on a day like today, Phil, is to get the souvenir Henri Desgranges.
Yes, and he takes 5,000 euros for that. And he's on the attack again, doing exactly what he did yesterday on the Col de la Lombard, being first over the top. Bit of a counter-attack here from I think it is from Girouca.
Well, looks like Girouca, Ahmed Girouca, the youngest rider on Euskaltel-Euskadi, and he's trying to set himself up. And Bernard Cole with Fabian Wegman alongside him. Now, This is a very interesting move here, because they're probably allowing Bernard Cole to go clear off the front end of the main field, because they think, oh, well, maybe he's only going to go and get the King of the Mountains points that are still left available. But if he goes over the summit with a 30 or 40 second advantage, this is the kind of move that Richard Virenque used to make in the old days, and keep going over the top.
Well, there's Thomas Vojkler just shocked from the inside there as he shot through. They're going to have to chase him down, I think, because he's getting way up in the King of the Mountains competition. They're racing for 5th place, which is 12 points on this climb, and I think they're not going to catch that man. They weren't expecting, but Vekman's decided to run at him here. Vojkler, don't forget, moved up into 3rd place yesterday. 12 points will give him 67, but that, and don't forget, Cole is scoring well anyway, so he's not going to close in on him.
Well, there's 30 points separating Thomas Vojkler from Bernard Cole at the start of the day. Somehow, Phil, I'm not sure that Bernard Cole is going to allow Thomas Vojkler to get that, because he's gone straight by him there.
They wiped him out. He went too early, and Bernard Cole might get a little bit better.
Yep, he may well get a little bit better, and he's also, let's not forget, got a teammate to help him out there, Fabian Wegman. They're opening up a little bit of a gap here, which could cause concern for Team CSC, as you can see.
But look who's come with them. Lee Augustine again, the youngest man in the race in red.
Not concerned at all about the fact that he had a very nasty accident yesterday. There is the Souvenir Henri Desgrange for the main field as they go by there. 1 kilometre to go to the summit. A hand up there for one of the riders here from George Hincapie's team.
Gerard Jolik. But Lee Augustine in the mountains here on the hardest days is advertising himself for a top job on a top team here, because he is a brilliant young climber, and he's shown that to us. He may well have won the stage yesterday had he not crashed on the way down the mountain. He's too modest to say that, but he was right there and right with a position to do so.
Well, obviously Fabian Wegman, national champion of Germany on the front there, he was involved in an accident yesterday, because he's pretty well bandaged up there. There's a couple of riders coming across the gap at this point, because obviously they're somewhat concerned about allowing a man like Bernard Cole to go free like this, Phil. After all, he is in 2nd place in the overall standings at 7 seconds.
Well, there's a dizzy sights as we come up towards the top of the Col de Galibier here. No guardrail on the right. And here are the riders who really initially broke away to win the points at the top, but are gaining a little bit more than the peloton usually likes to see. So as we head up towards the summit, it might be a good time to check in with Matt White, see what he's got to say.
Very good job, everyone. Stay out of the wind. We're going to save it for later on, guys. But remember, I know I sound like a broken record, but it's a long stage today. Fluids are very important, and food as well, guys. Always think about the next climb you're doing, for the eating for the next climb, for the next 30 minutes, the next hour.
Yeah, absolutely right, Matt. Matt's always eating, but he's not even using any energy. Every time we go there, he's always having his lunch. Anyway, Matt White in his first year as a team director, and he's really enjoying that job. He's a very colourful bike rider too, as Matt from Australia. But there's the steepness as they all race up towards the top. 3 minutes 50 since the leaders went over. And this is the dash for the barren heights of the Col de Galibier. This is the face of Vekman, the champion of Germany, who's ready to move over when he can. But watch out for John Lee. John Lee is beginning to enjoy these climbs in the Tour de France. As he starts to go up, he came up into 4th place yesterday in the mountain, so every little helps.
Well, it certainly does, but this is the acceleration of the man that everybody, I feel, is a little bit scared of, Phil, in the Tour de France this year. Bernard Cole, he looks over his shoulder.
He's cracked John, I think, there.
Well, he realises this young man from Austria has got a great acceleration. This bodes well, Phil, I think, for the showdown we're going to have on the Alpe d'Huez down towards the end of this race, because he's looking so easy, Cole, here, and I wonder if he's got a big attack left in him. And here comes Thomas Vojkler.
But look at that, he just took 6th place, Vojkler, there. So 5th goes to Cole, maximum points of the rest there for him. So Lee Augustine, the little South African young man, is not little, he's quite tall actually, who yesterday went right over the mountain on his face, slid through the rocks. His bike never stopped falling down a similar slope to the one on the right of our picture. But he's right there, he's keeping himself up in front. Schumacher gets to 20 though, Di Gregorio 18, Velitz, Perez, Cole gets 12 for 5th. Oh, and there's been a crash here, that might be Perez, I'm not sure where the camera's cut to. It was, yes. Oh, and it was caused by Di Gregorio. And poor old Perez couldn't control slipping off the edge. Oh dear, well that wasn't fair, was it? Because that really wasn't his fault, but he's up and running again. Ruben Perez is up and running. The boys won't ride away from him after causing him to fall. I'm sure they'll let him get back up to them. Still an awful long way to go today on this stage of 130 plus miles. 79 miles and 2 major mountains still to come. Well, it's a long chase back. Well, let's see if we can show you the overall standings. Now, there they are. Cole has got 97 now. Augustine has moved up 1 place over Lang to 61 points for him as a result of that. And Vojkler has gone up into 2nd as a result of that King of the Mountains. So they're all lining up behind Cole, but he's got a nice lead there. Of course, maybe we just saw a demonstration of what might be coming when we get to Alpe d'Huez. Who knows? On the Col de Galibier, just topping the summit and beginning the big descent now, right down to the town of Valois, which is halfway down the descent. And the leaders have already gone, of course. Well, we've seen that one crash of the leaders. He's up and running, which is he should be getting back up to the leaders, of course. But there's always this big danger. You see that slope off to the left of the peloton right now. Well, you go back yesterday, 24 hours, similar slope on the left. Watch the second rider. That was Lee Augustine. He never looked like turning around that corner. His bike just never stopped. It went on and on and on as he watched it go. He came back okay, believe it or not. This man had to wait, though, for nearly 5 minutes. That's where he finished behind there as he scrambled back up, but there's no bike, of course. And just moments ago, this happened to Adam. No, we're back with the leader here. That is Ruben Perez, who's just had to correct. He's crashed at 83k. He's chasing the leaders down now. He's okay. And that was a foot on the ground there by Di Gregorio, but he corrected it in time. Peter Velitz went on the inside and nowhere to go for poor Ruben Perez. And this is now Thomas Vojkler here. Adam Hansen also falling on the descent. He's okay as well. This is now a big chase down by Thomas Vojkler. Oh, and there's the crash again. And that is Adam Hansen on the floor. Well, they're all going down the same corner. It's quite clearly very, very acute just on that bend. But if as long as they fall away from that edge, it's a rider from Agri-Tabel on the floor. I think it's Freddy Bichot over on the far. That's it, Freddy Bichot riding away there. Well, fortunately, they're just tumbling, but they're not hurting themselves, which is what we don't want. And this is Thomas Vojkler. He's got away on the top of the climb. We've seen he's moved up into 2nd overall in the King of the Mountains, and he's kept going. And he's absolutely flying down. It's a pity we can't see more of him because he really will show you how to go down mountains. So there's the peloton, and they've pulled back a little bit of time now. Well, all of these diversions, Paul, of riders falling off all over the place, they're starting to bring back the leaders. But this is Vojkler being joined now, and that says something for the descending skills of the 2 riders coming up.
Well, I would think it's Chiruka, because he was up to the front when they went over the summit of the Col de Galibier, and probably the quick-step rider just behind will be Carlos Barredo. They're looking at about 30 to 40 seconds ahead of the main field, and you saw Vojkler there just look across the road in the valley to try and judge and see if he could spot where the front end of the race was, and he's trying to see whether or not he can bridge a 3 or 4 minute gap. It's a tall ask, but he's going to take lots of risks.
And he's prepared to do it by the look of it. We're dropping down towards Valois now, which brings us back from 2,600 to 1,400 meters. Then there's a little uphill on the Col du Telegraph. No prizes for that, and then it drops down into the valley itself where we take on food and then hit the climb of the Col de la Croix de Fer. Quite clearly Vojkler wants to get some mountain points here. He's up into 2nd place after the result on the top of the Galibier, and Lee Augustine has gone up into 3rd.
Well, that's a good acceleration and moving up in the overall classification for these guys. Thomas Vojkler probably thinks that if he can get away from the front end of the main field, he may well start to challenge Bernard Cole. And this is the last day, Phil, when there are big points available in the King of the Mountains classification. Yep,
a couple of 2nd category climbs tomorrow as we leave the Alps and head towards Saint Etienne, which is the old cycling capital of the world. Good cycling museum there, by the way, in Saint Etienne. Now I want to hug the left-hand side of the road on this way down. 119 kilometers to go. The dizzy descent of the Col de Galibier. The riders well spread out on the way down. Little group trying to reach the leaders. Thomas Vojkler. He's kept going since he came over the top of the climb. But all of the leaders still very much in the peloton here.
Well, just looking at the yellow jersey here of Frank Schleck, if you've been following the sport of professional cycling, you may well remember that Frank Schleck had a very nasty crash in the Tour of Switzerland recently, and just the other day he was talking to Bernard Hinault on the podium, and Hinault said to him, "I have a little piece of advice for you, young man. You need to check your tyre pressures in the mountains, because," he says, "I have a funny feeling that your mechanics are pumping up the tyres too hard, especially on the mountain stages." So he said before the start of every stage, you just loosen your tyre valve off, let a little bit of air out, and make sure that the tyres aren't too hard. Well, it seems to be paying off for him at the moment.
Just looking here at the King of the Mountain situation, 97 points for Cole, 65 for Vojkler, and up in the third, John Lee Augustine. These are the leaders here. They split up 2 by 2 just now. The one who fell got himself back into the action. These are the 3 pursuers at 118 kilometers, led by Vojkler, who likes to see his own way down the mountain, doesn't like to be accompanied by anybody. But these 2 riders have caught up the leaders here. One is Carlos Peredo in the white, and the other one is from Euskaltel Euskadi. And it looks as though it is Ahmet Jireka who's also got on the back here, Jiruka, who was voted the last year's most aggressive rider overall by the journalists and writers in the Tour de France. And they are flying down. Just watch the descent here. Vojkler, they just can't match Vojkler. He's out in front there. Peredo's not a bad descender, but Thomas Vojkler is very good. Now what's going on here? That's Schumacher telling Perez to hang on for the other 2. We need them. I think Perez there was being told by the leader, Schumacher, yes, to wait for the other 2 because we need them for the next climb. No point in descending away from them.
Well, Schumacher, Phil, probably remembers yesterday when he tried to ride away from the main field completely and utterly on his own, and he's realised today that if he needs any chance of success, he actually needs to have these guys to accompany him through the valley roads in between climbs, so that all of them can work together.
Well, Peter Velitz, the under-23 rider, world champion, is on the front. He's gone off to the left now. Di Gregorio goes through and does a little bit of work. They've got themselves organised again now, as they're not far out of the town of Valois, which means they'll soon be on the little hill of the Col de Telegraph. Just watching down there now. This is the peloton reforming on the descent as they drop down. All is well so far. The maillot jaune is there, and that was what happened. Almost shocked me that. That's what happened earlier on. Adam Hansen down as well. We'll take another break. Rejoin there. Schroeder Grady had spotted it, and he was warning about it. 108 kilometers to go now. Well, these riders on the Col de Telegraph, but it's not a steep climb. As you can see, they're on the way down here just at the moment. They're heading towards the valley before they start the climb of the Col de la Croix de Fer. No change here. They're not a friendly bunch today, these 4 riders. They have been counter-attacking and blocking. Schumacher has seemed to want to go away from him. He's at the back at the moment. George Hincapie, the American, we've just seen on the road with his shorts torn to shreds, which means he must have just fallen, and he's coming back into the peloton.
Well, he looked pretty cut up there just a few moments ago, and the way he was riding, though, Phil, I think those injuries seem to be pretty much superficial. We're over the summit now of the Col de Telegraph, and strangely enough, it doesn't even count as a climb on today's stage. It's not even categorized because it's only 2 kilometers. It would be categorized if they came from this side, because climbing up from this side, it's around about an 11-kilometer climb as it sets itself up for the final ascent up to the Col de Galibier. I always feel that this side of the Galibier, Phil, if you were coming up, is much more difficult than the side we've already climbed this morning.
It's a second category climb, the Col, I think, from this direction, leading on to the ore category of the Telegraph. 2 climbs for the price of 1 there. Not so today, of course, but what we have in store for the riders are 2 really tough climbs lying ahead of them. We're going to start with the Croix de Fer, which is 29 kilometers continuous climbing to its summit. These 4 riders here, just all managing themselves on the way down to Telegraph, which will take us down to Saint-Julien, Mont-Denis. There's the names, Perez, Schumacher, Velitz, Di Gregorio.
I think Di Gregorio here has lost his bottle a little bit, Phil, after that close call he had on the early part of the Col de Galibier's descent. He's going into those corners and he's taking the wrong line every time. Hincapie's managed to get himself back into the main field. He'll be a little bit shaken up by that accident. Yeah, he's ripped to pieces.
Not far from the top of the Telegraph. Fairly steady average speed for a mountain stage today. 21.33 kilometres an hour. And we'll probably won't get much quicker than that all day because of the climbs to the finish to come. And a lot of guys happy with the situation right now. Marcus Berghout dropping back there, probably to ask his captain George how he is. Yeah, oh, look at this too. That was Adam Hansen who fell too. Yes.
Yeah, well, it just goes to show it's a dangerous day. You have to pay attention all of the time. Hincapie a little bit upset yesterday, Phil, with losing out by about 30 seconds over the summit of the climb. He actually said that he felt that he had enough in his legs to catch up on the descent, but I don't think he expected the descent to be quite as fast and vicious as that, because he was looking at possibly adding a second stage victory to his win in Pla d'A back in 2005. And yeah, it's amazing to look at Hincapie as a professional athlete, Phil, because he's participating here in his 13th Tour de France before lining himself up for his 5th Olympic Games in 2 weeks' time.
Yes, a great athlete and a very consistent one too. Jeremy Roy is the rider coming through the back here for Française des Jeux, getting back into the peloton. All these boys dropped earlier, now getting back into the comfort of the field, and always a difficult manoeuvre. You've got to be aware of what's going on. That was Christophe Lemervel in the green.
Yep, he was the man who was in the breakaway yesterday for an awful long time. There's the summit you can just see of the Col du Telegraph, 108 kilometers to go. And you can just see a group of riders making their way back in through the cars there. That was a group of riders who were dropped just before the summit of the Col du Galibier, and they had to take an awful lot of risks, Phil, to come back into the main field on the descent.
Got back there, Hincapie's got back, they're all got back here, all in time to go off the back again. Danny Pate there's got back as well. Well, they now continue their descent before we get down to the valley, then we climb up the Col de la Croix de Fer, but nothing decided yet. In today's stage of the tour, we're down now to 104. We're just through the halfway mark of today's stage for the leaders.
Yeah, this is an 11-kilometer descent down into the town of Saint-Michel-de-Maurienne, and then the riders will ride along the Maurienne Valley for another 10 or 12 kilometers before they start that nasty 29-kilometer ascent of the Col de la Croix de Fer. And it is actually at its steepest at the bottom, and it's a hard climb to organize, Phil, because it goes up in steps, and there's 2 steps on the way up towards the summit.
I tell you what, Di Gregorio's losing ground here because he can't descend. 3:34, and Remy is being dropped going downhill. That's a real shame, but the boys can't wait for him if he can't chase them. He's really just got to get his line right into those corners, get some confidence and get his... So he's just keeping them in his sights, those 2 leaders. Stuart O'Grady, he's just guiding them down rather than racing down this descent. Yes, he just wants to get his leader to the bottom of the Croix de Fer.
And then what he'll do is, once they get into the town of Saint-Michel-de-Maurienne, they've got around about 12 kilometers of a fairly fast valley road to get themselves to the bottom of the Croix de Fer. Then I would think he and the other riders from Team CSC will give it absolutely everything, Phil, over the first 5 to 10 kilometers of the Croix de Fer. Then they'll hand it over to the leaders and say, right, we've done our turn, it's up to you now.
These are the 3 leaders. Perez is the one in the orange, Velitz is the one at the back. And Shoemaker is the one at the front, Schumacher. 60.8 miles to go, inside 100 kilometers to the finish now. As these 3 boys racing ahead of Remy Di Gregorio. I don't think he'll be back up with these leaders today. Velitz hanging on by the seat of his racing shorts as we continue our race down to the valley. He's here now looking for the riders on the Croix de Fer. Absolutely unbelievable situation. Normally that's seen there covered in snow, and the snow will be back again the next few weeks, because at night, believe me, even in July, the temperature gets very close to freezing at this altitude. And the Tour de France itself slightly changed, in as much a lot of riders just came back in the peloton on the flatter sections of the Croix de Fer, so it's still a big bunch down there. Enjoying the sun with the parasol as we're looking here at the 2 leaders. 3 minutes 40, Schumacher and Peter Velitz. Velitz from Slovakia, and riding all the time now on the front. Schumacher contributing nothing.
Well, I think he's contributing nothing, Phil, because he can contribute nothing. I think he's just once again hit the wall, and it was about the same time that he hit the wall yesterday after around about 150 kilometers. 10 kilometers to go to the summit of the Col de la Croix de Fer, and in about 2 kilometers time they will start to get to the very grippy part of this climb. And for Stefan Schumacher, I wonder if he's got enough in those legs to actually stay with Peter Velitz.
Well, there's the riders crossing a bridge. You can get some idea from this shot how many riders have come back onto the back of the peloton. It's quite a big bunch now. Still all CSC doing all of the work. Looking down there, I think we've got Popovic back in this pack.
Well, no, he's here.
Oh,
he's just about,
he's coming back now.
I'm hoping he's just about to get himself back onto the tail end of that group there, because it is very important for Cadell Evans to have a man like Jaroslav Popovic alongside him. But it just gives you an indication of how tough the pace is that's being set at the front there by, of course, Fabian Cancellara. This is rather sad to see, because
Lee Augustine,
I was going to say he is having a hard time, Phil, because of that pressure. You can't blame him really, because at 21 years of age he doesn't have the strength that you get from riding 2 or 3 Grand Tours in your legs.
There's one of the local bears clapping on the way here for the 2 leaders at 3:26. Still, it is just Velitz doing the pacemaking. Well, John Lee there just needs to hang in. It's a tough day for him, and he's still got to climb Alpe d'Huez. Looks like a nasty case of measles there for the local cow. But
Velitz calling for a drink, I should think, here.
Yeah. So cruel. We're still a long way to climb to the top of the Croix de Fer. We top out at 156. We've done 145 and a half.
End of Ruben Perez either, Phil, because he's only about 10 or 15 seconds ahead of Fabian Cancellara on the road. But Schumacher there,
he did well.
He did well to pull himself back up, and I'm pretty certain he probably got the professional bottle there, the bottle that accelerates you up to about 60 kilometers an hour for 10 seconds. There is Ruben Perez. Job done, day over.
Yes, watch over the shoulder, Ruben, because we back. Oh, there we are. That's it. He's back in the fold. 2 versus the rest now. 2 of the original 4, and Cancellara doesn't look at him. He just puts his head down, thinks of the rhythm in those big legs, and concentrates on just riding a pace that hurts everybody. Look at the riders further down the line. They're grovelling to grab wheels here. He's got them under pressure.
There's a lot of riders under pressure, Phil, in this group here this afternoon. The men who are looking to do something later on there, you can just see the white and the yellow jersey locked together. 2 brothers in arms this afternoon, Andy and Frank Schleck. They are thinking about trying to win this bike race for Luxembourg. And behind the man who might spoil the party, Bernard Kohl. A lot of people are concerned about Bernard Kohl, the Austrian rider, Phil, because they have no idea how good his climbing ability is going to be on the slopes of the Alpe d'Huez.
Yes, it's going to be a very intriguing ascent on the slopes of Alpe d'Huez, that's for sure. The gap down to 3 minutes and 2 seconds now. These 2 are all that's left in front. In that back group, we've got Cadell Evans, of course. We've got Carlos Sastra, Cancellara, Andy and Frank Schleck. Ruben Perez is there. Bernard Kohl, Denny Menchoff, all the heads are in that group. We've seen no weaknesses from the men who have dominated this Tour de France yet. Another rider cracks. Perez goes out of the back now. Can't keep up, neither will he try to. He's got to get to the finish. He's had his moments in front of the cameras. Now he has to beat the time limit, but there's a lot of riders behind. So
the thing I can hope for Team CSC is they know what they're doing here this afternoon, because this group, Phil, is starting to get reduced in numbers. Menchov looks to be suffering a little bit down towards the back of that group, and finally Fabian Cancellara has disappeared from the group. Damiano Cunego is about to go.
Yes, he's hurt, Damiano, and that has to be expected. He's fallen a little bit below what we expected from Damiano Cunego.
Johan van Sommeren is going to be the next man to go. That's 1 man less for Cadell Evans. It's destroying almost everybody. Now, the only reason they can set a pace like this, and the only good reason to do it, is if their climbers, Frank Schleck, Andy Schleck and Carlos Sastra, are going to do something a little bit later on. They've still got 2 men left in the fold who can work for them. Kurt Atler Arvidsson now has to commit suicide for the team. He's got to throw himself into this pace. But the only reason they can do this, Phil, is if the climbers have got the acceleration to go away later on. Otherwise, it's a waste of energy.
It is going to be every man for himself on Alpe d'Huez now. These boys are looking for the 5 kilometers to go to the summit. That bunch now has really thinned out. And there is the 5 kilometers to go. That probably is for Peter Velitz, is it? Or is it for the group
Velitz.
here? It's for Velitz, yeah. He gets the 5 to go. He is riding to a wonderful climb here to take the points at the top. That the battle for the Tour is still here. Christian van der Velde looking extremely strong now. So too Cadell Evans. Question mark, according to Paul, on Denny Menchov. Sastra is looking good. They could be just left together on this mountain when we go to the finish.
Well, in fact, Denny Menchov has moved right up to the front end of the group there along the side of Cadell Evans, while Fabian Cancellara, not surprisingly, Phil, disappearing from the front end of this group. He has ridden an unbelievably solid race here. Botcherov disappearing there. Nicola Vogondi is doing, I would have to say, probably one of the rides of his lives here to try and stay in contact. Here is big Jens Voigt. Jens
Still
Voigt
there and hanging.
Only just hanging, though.
Well, he's still hanging. He's about 6 kilometres from the top of this group now. Still a hard section of the road to come as they all start to shed now. We're getting to a very select group of riders. If you look at those orange jerseys, by the way, the man we're not expecting to see is 131, Denny Menchov. There goes.
Carlos, no.
It was
like 11.
Stuff. What it's doing now, Paul, we're going to be left with the 2 Schlecks and Carlos Sastra, Cadell Evans, Denny Menchov, Christian van der Velde. Just the men who are been the challengers of this year's Tour de France.
It's Sammy Sanchez. The team had said this morning it's all for Sammy Sanchez, but Sammy, if you want to go for it on the Alpe d'Huez, you better just get onto the back step of the bus there this afternoon, because it looks like the train is leaving the station. Kurt Adler-Arberson now at 5 kilometres to go as well, Phil, just stamping out the pace. They really don't have too many men left, and certainly they've got to start to think about when they're going to launch the attack. Stefan Schumacher is at 1:21, so he's only around about 18 seconds ahead of this very select group.
Well, you know, we're seeing here an elimination of all bar the favourites of the Tour de France. Now, normally in the past, we've headed to the Alpe with a group and the teammates still driving that group. This time, it's going to be a very different Tour de France. You look down now on a very select peloton at 1:39 behind the lone leader up front. Schumacher still in between. Peter Velitz leading. He's about 3.5 kilometres from the summit. These guys are approaching 4 kilometres, and he's just in front of them. He's cracked big time very fast.
Well, he really has cracked a huge time here, Phil, this afternoon, and he's slipping backwards. He'll get picked up shortly. I'm waiting to see here whether or not there's going to be any move at all that's going to come from Team CSC.
I don't think it's going to come on the climb.
They've done what they expected to do. They've isolated almost everybody in the group here this afternoon, but they're leaving it a little bit late if they want to get big time on Cadell Evans and Denny Menchov, because if they don't do something now, they'll all go over the summit of this climb together, and that'll leave just one solution left, Phil. Showdown on the Alpe d'Huez.
Of course, and you've got to get 3 minutes. A lovely congratulations there from Bernard Cole, the teammate of Schumacher there. Just thanked him for making the pace because he's diverted attention from Bernard Cole. Cole is right there, and I think a serious danger now to everybody in this Tour de France. He could win it, and he knows it as he climbs so well. And they're using now CSC, their last workhorse in Arberson on the front. Then they're isolated, 2 Schlecks and Sastra against the rest.
Well, the thing is, Phil, they've also then got the 10 kilometres ride along the Valley Road. It's from the top of the Col de la Croix de Fer, it's pretty much all the way downhill until they get into the Valley of Oison, and then it's a big charge along the Valley Road to the start of the final climb of the day, l'Alpe d'Huez. I have a feeling, I've just noticed in that group, the very select group that we're looking at, a young rider from Kenya. Number 57, Chris Froome, seems to be still in contact with the leaders on this day.
We'll have a look at that because Chris was the one dropped yesterday. It was John Lee, his teammate, who made it. John Lee's gone now, and Chris may be there. Well, that'll be a great ride by him. But there's another young man here. This man knows Chris Froome, used to race in Africa with him, Peter Velitz. As he comes up towards the summit, he's still a little way to go, and this is where the crowd is now.
I have a feeling they're raced on the same team for a short while. 3.3 kilometers to the summit of the Col de la Croix de Fer. We're getting now out into the open part of this climb, Phil, and this is the part of the climb where it really starts to get hot, because there's hardly any breeze in this part of the world here. You can just see on the left-hand side there a red and white jersey, and that's a rider from Team Bala World, and I think I would bet my bottom dollar now that that is pedaling Phil. He wants to go over this climb in first place. He knows he's got a great chance of doing it because he doesn't want to get caught before the summit. He's still got himself a minute and 8 seconds advantage over those chasers, and he's only about 200 meters to go before he summits this massive big climb, and that's something he can put down on his resume for many years to come, that he led the Tour de France on a massive day, the queen of stages we're looking at here this afternoon. After the Galibier, the Croix de Fer, we've still got on the menu to finish off with the Alpe d'Huez.
There's no sporting event in the world that attracts a crowd like this. No, the natural grandstands of the countryside of the world. And now we have Peter Velitz. He's 1 hour and 31 minutes behind the race leader of the Tour de France. But for him, he's now on top of the Croix de Fer.
That's it, he's over the top, and now he can line up for the descent down towards the finish. And Phil, it is a long way down there. He picks up a newspaper very rapidly, probably one of the best and cheapest insulators you can get. He puts that right in there to keep himself nice and cool, to make sure that he doesn't get too much of a chill coming in from the fast air that's going to rush past his body at 60 miles an hour on the descent.
The flags of Brittany, let's not forget, that's where the race started 3 weeks ago. And now he's on the way down. These boys are going to grab those newspapers, put them up underneath their racing jerseys, keep the wind out of their chest. They always fear bronchitis at this stage of the Tour de France. They wrap up for warmth on the descent. They don't need it once they get to the Alpe, because it's going to be the hottest day on the Tour de France on the Alpe for sure. Bernard Cole is out hunting for those King of the Mountain points. He'll sprint for second place, and that will consolidate his lead in that competition.
Well, it's important, I think, for Bernard Cole, Phil. Not only does he want to try and win this bike race overall, which he'll have to do with time when he goes towards the Alpe d'Huez, but winning the King of the Mountains classification for him was, in fact, one of his childhood dreams, and there he's got a few more points in the bag.
So Bernard Cole goes over in second place. He still keeps his options open, doesn't he? As now we start the journey down from the Croix de Fer. There's only one real mountain left in the Tour de France this year, and all of the favourites, and we should have known this, are going to go to the Alpe for Fabian, but certainly his teammate Bernard Cole could well be changing his polka dot for yellow if things go well today on the climb of Alpe d'Huez. We're looking down at the group maillot jaune here, which contains Frank Schleck at the moment in yellow, and all of the favourites, including, it seems to be, an inspired Christian van der Velde in there today. Well, another man rejoins here, Paul, and this is the case. We've been getting them coming back one after another. Cancellara is here now.
That's Nicola Vogondi, the national champion of France, wearing the tricolore, a title that he won just before the start of the Tour de France. In fact, on the Sunday before the Tour de France started. And he's riding an excellent race here this afternoon. As far as I'm concerned, he's riding above and beyond his normal capabilities. And he's made the junction here at the back. The race situation is still off the front end of the main field. Peter Velitz is leading, and here he is. He's got around about a 50-second advantage over Jérôme Pinault, and then a minute and 29 seconds back to the front end of the main field. And the yellow jersey group, Phil, with basically all of the overall leaders, all of the top 10 are in that leading group. In fact, I think probably all of the top 15 are in the leading group. The only person who might be missing is the 15th place rider, and that, of course, is Vincenzo Nibali, but he may well have been able to come back on the descent.
I'm not sure he's got back. I think he had a real bad packet towards the top of the Col de la Croix de Fer, but we'll find out as we get towards the bottom of this climb. There'll be a general regrouping, I think, as we head into the valley. Good chase this by Jérôme Pinault. He's making progress on Velitz, and Velitz could do with a hand right now. He's getting away from the peloton, at least for the moment. And an extra pair of legs as they get towards it. The situation, we've got 59, he's a minute behind now, Jérôme Pinault, and he's about 26 seconds ahead of the peloton.
There's just sitting on the back there is the champion of France, Vogondi. You can see, Phil, I think they're having a bit of time out here because it's been a tough ride for everybody this afternoon, especially Team CSC, who've really been dishing out the pain to the whole of the main field. And I think they want a little bit of respite before they start the climb in earnest. Once they get to the bottom of this descent, they've got around about 11 kilometers along a flat valley road, which takes them from the town of Allemont up to the town of Bourg d'Oisans. And when you go around that left-hand bend to start the summit, to start to climb Alpe d'Huez, it looks like a wall right in front of you, the climb up to the first corner, and that corner is corner 21. And that is not a good thing to see, especially if you're having a hard day.
The elevation's written on every board on the corner. Every corner is named after a famous cyclist who's been on the Alp. Well, 38 kilometers isn't very far, but unfortunately the Alp is horrible, and is about 24 kilometers from reaching the start of the final climb of the... has come back into the group, and he's gone straight back to the front. So as we speak and as we look at these guys now, I can tell you up front, Jérôme Pinault has crossed the gap, has joined the leader Peter Velitz, and between them trying to open a gap of just under 2 minutes. So 2 riders up front now. As we race down the side of this beautiful dam here, Fabian Cancellara back into his familiar role of pacemaker until he can do it no more. He'll probably stay there till the start of the Alp now.
Well, this casts my mind back to the Team Discovery Channel, US Postal Service, when they used to sit on the front end of the main field like this and lead up to the foot of Alpe d'Huez. And this afternoon it's any one of 3 for victory, I think, from Team CSC, because 3 riders from Team CSC have not done any work in the pacemaking at all, and that's Carlos Sastra, who's looking for the big move here this afternoon. Frank Schleck is looking to try and win, as he did a couple of years ago on the slopes of Alpe d'Huez, and Andy Schleck proving to be the far superior climber to his brother. But I think he will dedicate himself to the cause here this afternoon. And if they fumble, watch out for a move by Bernard Kohl, the man who leads the King of the Mountains classification from Austria.
Everything is possible now as we all arrive in the Alp together. Just looking down there at the moment, isn't this a beautiful part of France as well? I must say, I don't remember this stretch before. We go down on the side of the lake. Only 5 kilometers to go as they race along the valley road. There's 36 riders come together in that chase group with the yellow jersey, and they're chasing just 2 men who are 2 minutes in front. Little switch across the river here as we now head down towards the last 8 kilometers or so before we head into Bourg d'Oisans. Cheers all round for a massive crowd waiting there, as here, in fact, if you turn right here, you go to Grenoble. That's the way most will travel tonight to the stage finish tomorrow in Saint-Étienne.
And if you turn left the way we're going to, you go to Briançon. But on the way, there's a small town called the Bourg d'Oisans, which everybody knows is the gateway to the Alpe d'Huez. And once the riders go through Bourg d'Oisans, there's a left-hand turn, and there's a massive big wall in front of you up to turn number 21. After that, there's 20 more, climbing up to a massive altitude of 1,804.
Well, as the Alp continues along now, we're already as we get into the town of Bourg d'Oisans now. 66 seconds the 2 leaders have as they start and will shortly turn onto the climb of the Alp. 15 kilometers. We start the Alp in a minute, Paul, that we get a lead with 2 riders of only 63 seconds. It's all going to happen in the next couple of kilometers.
Well, it certainly is, and look at the job of work that Team CSC are still doing on the front end of the main field. Those riders who were dropped on the Croix de Fer, they came down on the descent, and now once again, Phil, as they go through the sprint point here, they are sacrificing themselves for the 3 leaders. The 3 leaders are Frank Schleck, Andy Schleck and Carlos Sastra, but they haven't done anything to get rid of the men who challenge them, like Menchov, like Evans, like Van der Velde, Kim Kirken, Valverde, Sammy Sanchez. They are all still in this group, but I don't think after the first kilometre we'll have a big group left.
Well, this is the start of the climb just here now. There's a massive, massive crowd. It lines all the way to the first start of the 21 corners to heaven. 14.4 kilometers. Can you imagine how those riders feel in the chase now, knowing that if their body responds in the way they hope, they could win the Tour de France by the end of this day? That's the sprint point. Nobody really cares. It means absolutely nothing at this stage of the race.
Well, just swinging around. Very shortly they're going to make the left-hand turn, and when you make that left-hand turn, Phil, you see this horrible black wall of tarmac in front of you, and that is the first incline of the Alpe d'Huez. Everybody is here. There's the indication, 13.8 kilometers to go to the summit, and very shortly they'll make that left-hand sweep, which will show them that black wall in front of them, and they'll probably go, oh my gosh.
These people have camped here for a week. It used to be a day. Then when the Alp caught on, it was 2 days. Now, if you're not here for a week, you won't get the spots because they will not give them to you. They have come down here. They've waited patiently. All the signs are in English here now because so many nations are watching this race who speaks that language. There's the peloton. They're about to swing on to the Alp now. And how much longer can CSC keep their domestiques on the front?
Scuttling up the outside there, I noticed Denny Menchov and his team trying to place him in the ideal position for the start of the climb. You can see the big tall figure as well of Johan van Sommeren. He is reported present and correct for Cadell Evans. Swinging off there, Kurt Adler-Arvesen says goodbye friends as Jérôme Pinot leaves Peter Velitz behind, but behind them, Phil, at only 51 seconds is the front end of the main field.
Well, this is all for everyone now. The man that can knock the other one out will win the Tour de France. Cadell Evans knows his best chance is to concede no time, but he can afford to concede a little bit. Christian van der Velde, he looks good today, but he needs to gain time. Jérôme Pinot has cracked here, 50 seconds and 13.4 kilometers. There's no little ease into the Alp. It bites you straight away. It's steep, it's hard.
And there is no pardoning either, because the Alp never gets easy. There's no flat part to the Alp, as we can see now the face here of Vladimir Gustov. He's going to give everything he can finally to try and set his men up. I have to say that Andy Schleck looks very comfortable there. Carlos Sastra knows
Sastra.
He has to go.
And Sastra's got Menchov on his back wheel. Here comes the kicks from the stars now. This is the moment of truth as the others drop away. Lawrence Tendam drops off, but his team leader is there. Menchov is marking Sastra. Sastra needs big time. He's gone from the bottom.
Well, he knew he had to do this. That was the only thing that Carlos Sastra could do. But look, Phil, how calm Denny Menchov looks here this afternoon. And behind, it's a little bit of tactical work going on for Team CSC, because they're saying,
Evans,
if you want to move, you've got to chase him down. And Cadell Evans knows that. Moving upside the outside, Johan van Sommeren, Phil, all of a sudden has found something special to go up there and help his leader.
Well, Sastra needs time. He's got to go. He's gone early. Denny Menchov had him marked well. He's gone with him. But Cadell Evans, helped by a teammate who cannot stay with him very long. Damiano Cunego's had enough. He's gone off the back. Cyril Dessel, the winner yesterday, he's just been blown away. George Hincapie, Kim Kirken rather, is struggling under the pressure. They must have known the pace would go as immediately this climb started. They've caught Sastra back. First attack has failed.
Well, again he goes. Carlos Sastra's got something in his legs here this afternoon. He wants to go alone, Phil. He does not want anyone on his back wheel, and Menchov is looking with a much bigger gear to try and pull Carlos Sastra back in.
Well, Menchov read the first one, but when you are a pure climber, you can do what others can't do. You can relax and accelerate for a second time.
You can go and you can go again, and that's exactly what Carlos Sastra has done. This is Roman Kreuziger. He's getting left out of the back end of the main field, but he's a young star too. And now alone at the front, going over and past Jérôme Pinot, is Carlos Sastra, who is climbing, Phil, like a real pure climber this afternoon.
Well, he is the man with the stamina. He's had a third place finish in the Tour de France the year that Floyd Landis was disqualified. He's had a fourth place finish. Sastra now needs 49 seconds to pull on the jersey of his teammate Frank Schleck. There's no reaction from Schleck now. Mario Ertz is the rider on the front, doing what he can for Evans as long as he can.
Well, Carlos Sastra knows, Phil, that if he wants to get his one chance at a shot at winning the Tour de France here this afternoon, he's got to get time. But he doesn't have to get seconds, he has to get minutes. And Mario Ertz there is doing the greatest job I've seen him do in the Tour de France for some time as he sets the tempo on the front. But they're all now leaving it up to the man who they're a bit concerned about. The man who was scary on Prato Nervoso, the man who leads the King of the Mountains classification, Bernard Cole, but he doesn't have it here this afternoon. He swings off and says to Frank Schleck, you do it. Schleck says, I'm not chasing, that's my man in front.
Well, this is around the point where Lance Armstrong said goodbye to Jan Ullrich and then continued to the top. But look at this now. Is this David Moncoutier, is number 188 at the back to the front here, as the riders crack. Jerome Pino is now been dropped here. Sastra knows he's made his move. Now can he hold it? It's an awful long way to the top and it never ever levels out.
Well, a lot of riders getting help here from moves like this move by David Moncoutier. He's on his last warning with his team. If he doesn't do something in this Tour de France, his contract will not be renewed. Now he's trying to ride himself into the bike race. Here's young Chris Froome going backwards, but I tell you what, he's learned an awful lot today, Phil, about himself as Mario Ertz disappears from the front of the race. And Menchoff, this...
No, it's not It is Menchoff, yes.
Menchoff
I thought it was
struggling.
a 2. Well, that's caught Denny Menchoff. The man we thought might be holding something back is holding nothing back. He has blown on the Alp. Now the battle is strengthening. Christian van der Velde is still in that group there, while Sastra makes his bid. Yes, he is only 49 seconds off yellow, but he needs much more than that for Cadell Evans not to win the Tour, because Cadell will annihilate him in the time trial by anything up to 90 seconds.
Well, you can see now Bernard Cole looking over his shoulder. Come on, come and help me. But on his shoulders, he's got the two Schleck brothers. They're just sitting, Phil, in the wings and waiting. They are hoping that their man, Carlos Sastra, has got the ability today to pull out minutes, not seconds, over Cadell Evans and the other favourites. David Moncoutier is back in the group, but this now is a group of the heads of state. Still, Christian van der Velde is there. Still, Cadell Evans is there. And Evans, Phil, I think now is looking to make the move.
Well, Evans looks across here now because Bernard Cole, his head always nodding in this straight side motion, has got to the front here. Cyril Dessel looks as though he's back in this race at the moment. And Cadell Evans looking to climb now, locked in. He's marking the yellow jersey of Frank Schleck. He better watch out where Bernard Cole goes as well.
Well, Bernard Cole is being put into a position today that if he wants to win this bike race, Phil, he's going to have to do something special. He dreamed about getting himself the yellow jersey on Prato Nervoso. Now he's got the polka dot jersey on his shoulders, setting a false tempo now, and it looks as if...
attack.
Yeah, that's AG2R going off the front of the group.
Well, AG2, is this Dessel or Efekim? I can never recognise these two. As they start the attack here for AG2R, there'll have to be a reaction, but not quite so sinister, as they must chase back the race leader.
Well, I tell you one thing, the Schleck brothers are all over the front end of this group, Phil, and they are controlling it somewhat dangerously. And I have a feeling if anyone was to come back to Carlos Sastra, the Schleck brothers are going to whack this group very hard indeed.
And look at Christian van der Velde, the American who came here really as leader of his team, but nobody really thought he would challenge for a podium finish. He's been challenging ever since the race started. It's Vladimir Efekim, yes, who's in that group. The group consists of Cadell Evans, Andy Schleck, Frank Schleck, Valverde, Efekim, Bernard Cole, Christian van der Velde. The heads of this year's Tour de France are now fighting it out on the Alp. And it could be the winner tonight, will be the winner in Paris. And the yellow's gone. And Cadell Evans immediately reacts.
Well, Cadell Evans, he knows he has to keep a very close eye on Frank Schleck here this afternoon, because this man, although he leads Cadell Evans by 8 seconds, if he gives him any more time, he knows he's got a very close chance. Look at this. Evans has finally taken the race by the horns here, Phil. He's decided, right, guys, I'm going to show you why I am the #1 favourite before the start of the Tour de France, because I will dominate the pace here. But immediately, it's Bernard Cole comes to the front again.
For me, the danger is Cole. I think Schleck is in difficulty. That should have worked for Frank, and it didn't do so. I'd be very worried now. And Andy Schleck is also at the back. Is he planning to launch an attack as well? A great move by Sastra. He had no choice. He had to go at the bottom. He needs a win by 2 minutes if he's got a chance of winning the Tour. That's what we think.
That's what we think, and I'm sure that's what Cadell Evans thinks as well. The great thing about Carlos Sastra, Phil, is he is a magical climber. Sitting at the back here, though, is
Chris Froome's coming back up here.
He's coming back with Denny Menchoff. He's pulling himself back into the bike race here this afternoon.
Well, just looking here at Carlos Sastra, the clock is saying he's nudged out 22 seconds. He's 49 seconds, so he's 27 seconds off yellow. Make that 25 seconds off yellow. This is Bernard Cole. They've never had an Austrian rider like this. Andy's going. Andy's turned. Cadell has spotted him, and he's on him straight away. But Andy just wanted the back wheel of Cole.
He's just watching, making sure that nobody goes. They're trying to protect the position of Carlos Sastra here this afternoon. Valverde looking pretty comfortable in this group. Team CSC have laid the foundations here this afternoon. What they need to know is how much energy have the other guys got the group. And Efremkin is about to make a move.
A 1:13 span of the top 5 in the Tour de France as Vladimir Efremkin goes. He may not be quite so heavily marked by Cadell, but Andy has decided to shoot across that gap and join Efremkin on the attack. Now Andy Schleck himself is 9 minutes behind. There's no reason for Cadell Evans to chase him down.
Yeah, but I tell you one thing, one man who was responding to that was a certain rider from the United States, Christian van der Velde, has gone right across that gap, and I think van der Velde decided to go straight over the top of them.
Van der Velde said this morning, if he arrives at the Alp and feels good, he will attack. He needs a little bit of time, and then in the time trial he knows he will have the advantage along with Evans, and Andy Schleck is up there with him right now. I think Frank Schleck is in trouble.
Well, Frank Schleck is sitting there back on the wheel of Cadell Evans, as he was on the climb a couple of days ago to Prata Nervosa, when he gave the advantage to his brother and he gave his advantage to Carlos Sastra. Trying to keep himself in the bike race though, number 131, Denny Menchoff, Phil. He looked so strong at the bottom of the climb, but that's the amazing thing about Alpe d'Huez. It is an unforgiving climb. You make one effort too many and then you have to pay for it.
Frank Schleck, his face never ever looks as though he's in trouble. I've never seen him appear to suffer, and yet I'm not so sure he can lift his pace here. Evans is marking Valverde at the moment. Andy's come back and had a chat with brother Frank and probably said, what do you feel like? Because they need to know the answers here. Cadell has his hands full. They're hitting him at every side. This is the rider I would worry about, Paul, Bernard Cole. Cadell knows he can beat him in the time trial, but he won't want to give him much.
He doesn't want to give him too much at all, and the amazing thing about Bernard Cole is he'll keep going and going. And as soon as he saw the impetus going out of that group, he decided to accelerate. But look at the way this man is pedaling here. Carlos Sastra is now inside of 10 kilometers to go. 6 miles of climbing. Again, he's riding a long solo effort. He needs more than 28 seconds, Phil. I've got to tell you that. He needs an awful lot more, maybe 2 minutes. And to get 2 minutes on the final climb is not an easy call.
I've never, ever seen Carlos Sastra race as well as this. Let me quickly tell you his finishes in the Tour de France. In 2001, 20th, 2002, 10th, 2003, 9th, 2004, 8th. He dropped out a little bit in 05, 21st. 2006 he was 3rd. Last year he finished 4th. There's only one place he wants, it is the win. And this is his last chance. He needs 2 minutes to win the Tour.
He's got to get that, but it's awfully difficult on the final climb of the day to do that. And the only chance he'll get that is if the other guys start to crack or start to watch each other. And still, Bernard Cole knows that. He's not letting anybody get off the front end, because if he loses time today on somebody like Carlos Sastra, he could be losing a podium position.
There's so many riders now being hit from all sides, but I have to say, what a wonderful Tour de France. Frank Schleck here has gone to the front. I do not believe he's got it. He's lassoed Christian van der Velde and put him back. Evans has climbed through now. He's got Bernard Cole. At the moment, things are good for the Australian, I think, because Sastra's only got 34 seconds. But by the same token, Paul, and an attack by Schleck. Was Schleck kidding us all here? There's a reaction from Cole. This is a huge effort by Schleck. He looks back, you know. I'm not sure he can ram this one home. Cadell Evans doesn't look like a man in trouble.
Neither does Bernard Cole, who keeps dragging himself back. But I think the Schleck brothers, Phil, are playing with this group a little bit. They're launching these attacks to take the impetus out of the organisation of any chase behind Carlos Sastra. And when they slow down, it's going to give advantage to Sastra. And look at that, 40 seconds. Valverde now says, OK,
He's looking for 3 minutes and 23 seconds, and we thought he'd written himself out in the Pyrenees. The champion of Spain has got the Schlecks on his wheel, and he's split him away from Cadell Evans and Bernard Cole.
Well, that was a big move, and now they're going to put Cadell Evans on the defensive. Cadell Evans is on the wheel of Bernard Cole, and he knows he's got to move.
This is the effort. Look at the face of Andy.
Andy Schleck looks over and says, bro, let's go.
Well, this is it now. They've got the gap. They've broken the elastic. Evans is on his own. He's got to get him up there. Christian van der Velde. He's followed by Bernard Cole, and this is a huge effort. Now, one thing about Cadell Evans is he's an absolute fighter.
He will fight. He'll try and stay in the bike race here this afternoon. Alejandro Valverde set that up. He knocks down, and there it's all down though, Phil, by Cadell Evans sitting on the wheel of Van der Velde. Van der Velde is riding a superb Alpe d'Huez here this afternoon, and Bernard Cole is the man now put into difficulty. Well, I have to say that's his own fault.
It is every man for himself here. I'm not sure, and you can never prove it, but I reckon Valverde's got a little deal going with the boys from Luxembourg. Now they're still talking, and that's not allowed, but of course, who cares? This is the Tour de France. We're talking about the race win today. 9.1 kilometers to go. Schleck is trying to get the spectators out the middle of the breakaway here. Now, Valverde carries on. Andy Schleck has not got it, I'll tell you right now. And Cadell is a little bit slow to respond, but still looks good.
Well, Cadell doesn't have that acceleration on the slopes of a climb like this, Phil. What he does is he allows somebody to accelerate like a climber, then he slowly drags himself back up to make the contact, because it's like the other guys have got petrol engines and he's got a massive, great big diesel engine. But once he gets it up to speed, it's very difficult to slow him down.
We're about 17 minutes away from the end of the stage. How much time can you lose? And that's what Cadell Evans will be reckoning now. Carlos Sastra, they stopped giving us a time check there. He must be close to his race lead though, of 49 seconds. He's got 23 of them just now. Those counter-attacks by his own teammates is damaging Sastra's lead.
Yes, but it may well pay into his advantage down towards the end, because what these accelerations and decelerations will do will take the will of the other guys in this group away from chasing down. Look at Bernard Cole. He was the man who was doing most of the pacemaking on the front before to try and pull back the breakaways. Now he's been put onto the defensive.
Well, there is the select group, and Stefan Hubert has somehow got himself in there, the oldest man in the race at 38, riding with the elite of the Tour de France. And there goes another attack there. That's Efekim who's just launched the attack. It's counted. It's Cole who comes up alongside Andy and Efekim. Well, they're all together. I can't imagine how Matt White is getting on. Let's find out. I'm back. This is all for everybody now. Well, we still see here the man who's the oldest rider in the race here, Stefan Gurk. This is Velitz on the backside. He's now lost ground. Denny Menchov just trying to hold those yellow cars up ahead in sight, but he's losing yet again more time as Andy Schleck tries to again put a nail in the coffin of Cadell Evans and Bernard Cole.
Well, I'm not really sure why Cole keeps chasing across after these groups, Phil, but he's got himself the gap this afternoon. Andy Schleck looks the most comfortable to me of all of the riders in this group, because he is doing the work. He's marking all of the moves. Again, Van der Velde's got the legs to come across this gap, and he knows Frank Schleck very well. Let's not forget they used to be teammates on CSC together.
Well, they text each other after Frank got the yellow jersey, but they both want the yellow jersey. They're not friends now. Cole has struggled up behind Andy. These boys are all on the limit of their ability, and they're almost equal. It's all a question as to who can put the attack in when the others are just feeling a bit rough.
Team manager of CSC charging across the gap. Have a quick look at that time gap there, Phil. 55 seconds. The fact that these guys keep attacking and slowing down means they're actually playing into the hands of Carlos Sastra, who's riding at his own sensible pace all of the time. Every time they attack in this group, they each into his lead, but then they slow down too much and they give the advantage to Carlos Sastra.
Carlos Sastra is now the race leader of the Tour de France on the road. If he gets to the top, he'll be the 7th leader of this extraordinary event. The record, by the way, is 8 different leaders. And there he is now, being cheered all the way to the Maillot Jaune. But even if he pulls it on tonight, he won't have enough time to keep it if it stays at 57 seconds.
No, it's going to be a little bit too short for him. He's looking for at least another 1.5 minutes on today's stage, Phil, because let's not forget he starts the day 49 seconds behind his teammate, but he's also 41 seconds behind Cadell Evans in the overall classification. So he needs to start the time trial with at least 2 minutes lead. And again, there's another move coming from AG2R.
Well, this is incredible. The way these guys push it home, I really don't know. I think this is Valverde who's gone now. And again he just creates a ricochet reaction from these boys.
But Andy Schleck, every time, Phil, is the policeman, and I tell you what, Denny Menchov is slowly but surely pulling himself back into this group, and that's an indication that with these accelerations and decelerations, their average speed is not as great as that of Carlos Sastra. There you can just spot...
Christian Velde is going to give it a go. He's going to go. He needs a little bit of time to have fight back into a podium position here. He lost time yesterday when he crashed on the way off the bonnet, and that's why Andy Schleck has marked Christian Velde and taken brother Frank back to the front.
Well, Cadell Evans on the wheel there of Alejandro Valverde. The Schleck brothers, I have to say, Phil, I don't think they're in difficulty. Today they're chasing all of the moves, giving the advantage to their man Carlos Sastra. Dragging his way back into this race is Bernard Cole. He spent a lot of energy in the early part of the climb. I think wasting energy chasing down these little accelerations, and now he's seriously been put on the defensive. Sammy Sanchez comes back, Stefan Goubert comes back, and I think very shortly Denny Menchov will come back.
Well, he'll do a darn good ride if he gets back here, the way they're hitting each other. Look at the face of Velde. He's almost licking his lips on Alduez as he drags Frank. I don't agree with you, Paul. I think Frank Schleck's on the limit of his ability today. And you're right, Denny Menchov is going to get in amongst it here. They'll have to make room for him. The Russian rider is still a threat. One gets the feeling this Tour de France, by the time we get to Paris, we'll still be talking seconds.
I think you're absolutely right there, but Carlos Sastra is doing a phenomenal ride. You know, he's sat in the wings, he's waited and breathed this particular stage here this afternoon. He's known that this was important. Schleck is going again.
Well, they're going to have to keep on answering it as best they can, because Frank Schleck has got no acceleration there. He really hasn't, and Cadell Evans is just marking them. He's not putting in any attacks.
I tell you what, Phil, these little accelerations and decelerations by the Schleck brothers are taking the impetus away from the group. They're disorganizing it in a very clever manner, because everyone has to chase them down. You can't let Schleck go because he's the yellow jersey. You daren't let Andy Schleck go because he's got incredible legs on the slopes of this climb. Evans now is slowing down, and that's going to give you, the next time we get a time check, possibly 1.5 minutes
at the moment.
Carlos Sastra.
77 seconds, 1 minute 17 seconds, advantage Sastra. I take my hat off to him. He had to attack at the bottom, and he didn't waste any time in doing it. He hit him hard, and he's got clear. He took Menchov, remember, went back, then went alone. Menchov rejoins these 10 boys.
That tells me that there's no chase organised in this group. These guys are all over the road, and if
they should have done the Schleck, stop that business of attacking, let the leader go.
That is why they attacked, to break down the rhythm, to break the will of the riders in this group, and that's why nobody wants to chase. Cadell Evans really now should think about getting to the front and taking the stranglehold. It's Tadej Valjevic there on the front who's doing the pacemaking, but I'm not sure he's got the big engine to take down Carlos Sastra.
Well, Cole has got to remember too, he can't time trial either so well, and he needs time on Cadell Evans, and he's still in this group. He's also seeing a man leapfrog him in the overall classification. There's 11 riders here now at the chase. As we go to the front, the gap is shot up. 1 minute 27 now. If he gets 2 minutes, he could win the Tour de France, and that's what he's looking for. He won't win it today, of course. He's got to go to the time trial. 6.4 kilometers to the finish. 6.3. Sastra could be pulling off the ride of the Tour here.
Well, I'm surprised that there's no organised chase behind, but I'm pretty certain that it's the fact that the two Schleck brothers, Phil, have been going left and right after all of these moves has discouraged the riders in this group. It's taken the will to chase away from them. Let's not forget, Team CSC assassinated all of these riders this afternoon. Menchov will be happy with the fact that the pace has come down a fraction, because he's pulled himself back into the fold.
Well, Sanchez has got himself back in here, as well as Menchov. They've clawed the way back, an indication that the pace has slowed a little bit. As we're heading towards 6 kilometers to go now, they're saying it's 1.5 minutes the lead of Carlos Sastra, and there will have to be a reaction here, probably in the last 2 or 3 kilometers. Evans has got to try and go, so too is Cole.
Well, it's interesting. interesting to note that the man who's doing the pacemaking on the front is the oldest man in the bike race. It's Stefan Goubert from AG2R, and he's brought it down to 1 minute and 25 seconds. AG2R are riding a phenomenal race here this afternoon, but I wonder if the pace is not going to be high enough. We're inside now of 6 kilometers to go to the front, and the main heads of state, Phil, are not doing the chasing. It's one of the lesser teams in the Tour who are doing the chasing. It's AG2R. They're trying to pull their man Tadej Valverde back, but he's only in 10th place in the overall classification.
Well, that's the strange thing about the Tour de France now, because the leaders are so close here. This man is shortly going to see the summit. It'll still be a long way away, but at least he'll see it as he comes round the village of Huez, round the corner we always call the Dutch corner, where so many Dutchmen have ridden to victory on the Tour de France. But Sastra today really has shown us he deserves to win the Tour de France.
Well, he wants to, Phil. He's dreamed about it. He's one of the most consistent Tour de France performers over the last few years. In fact, he's one of the most consistent Grand Tour performers, but he's never got the big win that he's looked for. He's never got the big win that he's promised, and he's stretched it out once again to 1 minute and 35 seconds. You know, if they don't organise the chase, they're going to lose huge chunks of time, and if he goes to the summit with 2.5 minutes advantage, he could be leading Cadell Evans by 2 minutes.
Well, these boys, those attacks have absolutely knocked the stuffing out of them just now. They need time to recover because there's no resting place on this climb. It is a vicious climb. The top riders will climb it in 36, 37 minutes. The rest will take an hour to an hour and a quarter today. There's plenty of Australian flags here. There's even a British flag here. Well, the British riders have had their moment. 4 stage wins by Mark Cavendish. Mark would be the first to tell you he wouldn't win up here. This is now a battle for final honours.
Well, Cadell Evans at the back are pretty much on the defensive. It's AG2R is on the front end. Stefan Goubert, 38 years of old, is setting the pace ahead of Bernard Cole, rocking his head a bit. But I tell you what, Valverde looks pretty dangerous as well there. Moving up, Valverde's having a quick chat with the team management there, deciding what he needs to do. The 2 Schleck brothers are waiting in the fold to see what they can do. 1 minute 47, it's going up all of the time.
He's going to hit the 2 minutes, he's got 5 kilometres to do it.
Well, I think he will hit the 2 minutes, and the fact is, Phil, that none of the big heads of state are chasing him. Evans isn't chasing, Menchov isn't chasing, and they're not going to get any help at all from the 2 Schleck brothers, who are just sitting there waiting.
3 miles from the summit, and Sastra is heading for gold. This is the crowd here. 5 kilometres to go from the summit of Alpe d'Huez. Well, let's go back into the Garmin team car. Matt White must be beside himself.
They're cheering him, chapping him on the back. They know this man. They've seen him for many years in the Tour de France because he's always been a steady performer.
Well, now he's shown us to be a very exciting bike rider. 2 minutes is hit, and Sastra has only ever won 1 stage of the Tour de France, and it was in Bonasque in the Pyrenees. He's now having the moment of his life here on the Alpe itself, and this group behind, they've got to attack. They've all got to go for it shortly.
They cannot. They've got nothing left, and every time they move, on their wheel is a Schleck brother, whether it be Andy or whether it be Frank. They cover every move. They're not going to get any assistance there from Denny Menchov because he's just happy to be in this group. Cadell Evans is just sitting at the back there on the shoulder of Frank Schleck. 2:04. There's still 4 kilometers to go. I have a funny feeling today Carlos Sastra could be laying down the foundations of victory in the Tour de France this year. He's banked everything on this 1 month of the year.
History has shown us that the man that pulls the yellow jersey on at Alpe d'Huez wins in Paris. He's building that sort of time gap to maintain the tradition of the Tour de France. At 5 kilometers to go, this is the first attack. It looks to me as though it's Valjevich going now.
Efrem Kinney's the one who's moving this time, I think, Phil. There, Cadell Evans had said, right, enough is enough. I'm going to chase you guys down. You can see also Andy Schleck coming across here. He'll come to the wheel of this young man and he'll just sit there and say, if you want to chase my mate, you go for it, because we're looking for the overall lead here this afternoon.
Well, if they've got the energy now, they've got to counter this move, and they've got to up the ante a bit and go again. Because the flurry of action we've had has gone from the impetus of this breakaway, and that little acceleration you see took off a second or so. 1:58, and the return is there, but that's on these 2, not on the group Cadell.
Well, you see Andy Schleck just sitting there. He's covering all of the moves. He's playing an incredible defensive role this afternoon. The yellow jersey group are playing the tactics here this afternoon. They're saying, Cadell Evans, you want to win the Tour de France, you assume the responsibility and you set the pacemaking on the front end of this group.
It's the only answer right now. Vladimir Efekim looks over his shoulder and he's realised he's got the gap. Andy Schleck has found the strength. This is the younger of the Schlecks and he's going to be the future star of the family by the look of it.
Valverde is the man lifting the pace on the front here now. He wants to pull it all back together as well. I have to say, Alejandro Valverde has found his legs here in the Alps this afternoon and he's pulling himself right up to Efekim and Andy Schleck.
Well, this is as big a crowd, I think, as we've ever seen. I didn't see where they were all hiding last night when we came up, but they're all there now, enjoying the arrival of the Tour de France at the mecca of this cycling event. And still at 1:53, this counter move is shutting it down, but these two riders really don't affect the yellow jersey. It's still on the shoulders of Sastra.
Yeah, but what's going to happen now, Phil? They've called them up. Cadell Evans has seen this.
Evans
he wants to keep the end.
He's lifted the pace.
He wants to lift the pace. He really just needs to ride a time trial now, Phil. He's seen that he's got 3.5 kilometers to go to the finish, and he has to ride this final time trial. He has to now ride the time trial like the one he's going to ride on Saturday. He's got to use everything he's got in his body now to reduce that time gap.
This is the ride we're looking for. Cadell Evans, the Australian, has taken control. He knows if he's to win the Tour de France, he must not allow Sastra to get 2 minutes.
He knows that in his mind. I think he fixed before the start of today's stage how much time he could lose on this mountain, and the time gap is stretching out again to over the 2-minute mark. But for Evans, he's got to ride his heart out here at 4 kilometers to go, Phil, to get himself back into a shot at winning the race in the individual time trial at the end, because Carlos Sastra is going to win the stage, but the question will be, how much time has he been able to put between himself and Cadell Evans?
And the answer is, we're not going to know this answer till Saturday, at least right now, because Cadell Evans is reacting to the situation. 2 minutes 8 might just be enough. Sastra pushes on. Absolutely terrific cycling by Carlos Sastra.
This is a phenomenal performance by this man, and it was a full performance that was set up by his team. As soon as they came away from the town of Embrun this morning, the front of the main field was covered by Team CSC, set up by Stuart O'Grady, set up by Nicky Sorensen, by Fabian Cancellara. This man has come out on the slopes of Alpe d'Huez this afternoon to repay the work that was done by his teammates. They laid the foundations for this move, Phil. They assassinated everybody in the race here this afternoon, and they left it up to their man to go out and finish it off on Alpe d'Huez. Look at that clock, though. Evans now is losing a bit of impetus again. He got the courage a few moments ago, and now it's hurting him. 2:15 is the gap.
Cadell Evans now knows he's got no friends here now. They know you want to win the Tour de France, you get up front and do the pacemaking. CSC, after a day of working for their man, have played all of the cards, and the ace is now up the road as we approach Alpe d'Huez itself, where the crowd are now behind the barriers here. Carlos Sastra will shortly flick around that far bend. He's riding through a noise of people here. 2:13 the gap. It is Carlos Sastra versus Cadell Evans, and the way it's looking, one will win the Tour de France.
Well, Cadell Evans wears number 1, and he has to take complete control when you are the favourite, Phil, and Cadell Evans was, before the start of this Tour de France, the number 1 favourite to win this bike race. He now has to take responsibility, and you're right, there are no more friends in this group, but the two riders from CSC, Andy Schleck and Frank Schleck, are a psychological anchor on the back wheel of Cadell Evans here this afternoon, because he knows he's dragging the Schleck brothers up. Look at the flags of Luxembourg.
It's an absolute tunnel of flags of Luxembourg. Valverde is gone now, and the Cadell won't have an answer to that because he's been making all of the pace. Frank Schleck has marked Valverde. I have a feeling these two have had a bit of a discussion. Valverde now opens up the attack, and Evans is going across the gap because Frank doesn't have it.
I tell you what, Christian van der Velde is putting in a great performance here this afternoon, because he is chasing down all of these gains. Evans has got to keep the tempo going. He dare not slow down at all, because if he does, that will be reflected in the time advantage of Carlos Sastra at the end of the day. Look at the face of Denny Menchoff. Andy Schleck looking over his shoulder here. This young kid in the white jersey, Phil, 1 year is going to win the Tour de France. He is such a phenomenal climber. Give him a couple of years to improve his time trialing ability, and the way he rides these climbs, he's going to walk away with the Tour de France in the next 5 years.
It may be even next year, so Cadell better win it this year, as he puts in another bid here to become Australia's Sportsman of the Year, because he's ridden a race all by himself and he's taken everything thrown at him. 2:17 is the gap. Cadell knows, he'll have it in his ears. His manager will have told him, you've got to limit that escape, Cadell, because if you don't, you won't take that time back in the time trial.
Carlos Sastra, it says on his helmet and it says in his heart here this afternoon, as he digs deep, he's looking for the Flamme Rouge, he's looking for the 2 kilometre to go banner. He's got to ride this time trial of his life, and at 2.15 kilometres to go, he's got 2.15 seconds advantage over the group containing all of the main contenders. Evans is pulling himself, Phil, inside out at this time. He knows he's got to do it.
2 kilometres to go. 2 things we've shown today as the riders here come up the barriers of the last 2 kilometres of the Tour de France today. Sastra is heading for the stage win and the yellow jersey. 2 minutes 19, the spread to the maillot jaune. Sastra's proved that he will win the stage, that he will take the overall lead. He has not yet proved he will win the Tour de France, but it'll be jolly close by the end of this day.
It will be very close. I tell you what, Valverde looks so good. He looks like he's on the edge of his seat waiting to pounce, and I wonder if he's not pouncing today because he's thinking about national pride. He's thinking about Spain, and he's thinking about Carlos Sastra. Here at the back, Christian Vande Velde has done a great job on the slopes of Alpe d'Huez this afternoon. Carlos Sastra, though, Phil, is in this part of the route where it's absolutely crazy. You can hear the noise. They're absolutely shouting like crazy for this man because they know he's doing a great performance. 2:22 is his advantage, and it still continues to go up.
Well, we're looking at number 11 here, the number Stephen Roach wore when he won the Tour de France for Ireland in 1987. Now Carlos Sastra is trying to win it for Spain. I would reckon that Christian Vande Velde might be on for 2nd place today and take the best of the rest here. We're getting up into the plateau of Alpe d'Huez. It rises right to the finishing line. Cadell Evans has got to drag these boys up. He's got to keep thinking time and not position.
He must not think about finishing 2nd or 3rd on a stage like this, Phil, as we're now looking at almost 2.5 minutes. Looks over his shoulder to say, am I getting any help at all here this afternoon? The answer is no. When you are the champion, when you are the man who's the #1 favourite, you have to assume the responsibility yourself. The 2 Schleck brothers just sitting there. The man who I think made a few mistakes in the early slopes of this climb is 1:15 there, Bernard Cole. He made so many attacks that he lost all of his power that he could have used to the end of this climb, as Cadell Evans now is trying to find that last little bit to survive. Menchov comes forward now. He's got his big engine finally warmed up.
It's looking a bit worrying for the Australian at 2:24. Take off 40-odd seconds, of course, because that was his advantage behind Cadell. Menchov is there as well, haunting on the right-hand side. Valverde is waiting to dash for the line for the sprint as well. Cadell Evans is fighting to win the Tour de France. The others can't. He can.
Well, he's just got to ride now as Carlos Sastra finally sees what he's been dreaming of, the Flamme Rouge. 1,000 metres to go, and he dare not, Phil, even think about celebrating the victory at the end of this stage. He's got to ride right to the line to try and get as much time as possible.
Sammy Sanchez goes. He sat at the back. He had to rejoin with an acceleration like that because it refreshes anybody. That 2nd place just left the pack there. Andy Schleck has shot out after him. Now if Cadell could just grab a wheel of Andy Schleck. Cadell's looking for a reaction. Menchov's launched an attack as well. And now Vande Velde's going. They're all leaving Cadell Evans.
Well, Cadell Evans has got to just calm himself down here, Phil, and ride to the finish. It's all about time at this point. Sammy Sanchez now has got himself off the front, and he's looking to try and get himself a 2nd place, but he could be actually doing damage to the lead of Carlos Sastra, his compatriot, but a man who rides on a different team.
Well, the thing is, he'll provide a carrot now for the others to chase. It might just reduce the lead of Sastra by a little bit. Cadell Evans still driving here, and there's Sastra dodging the barriers now as he heads for the finish.
Well, Vande Velde has gone behind as well in a very fast reaction. Now inside of the last 400 or 500 metres, Carlos Sastra looking around those corners. Where's the finish line? But what's important, Phil, is the time on the finish line. He's got to get himself around this corner. He's straightening up for the finish line, one of the most famous finish lines in the sport of professional cycling, the summit of Alpe d'Huez, 150 metres.
Carlos Sastra isn't the first Spanish winner here, but he might be the most significant, as he's now laid his plan. He's waited for a week for the climb of Alpe d'Huez to prove this was his Tour de France. Now it is time that will give us that answer. But for the moment, meet the man who wins an Alpe d'Huez and becomes the seventh leader of the Tour de France. Carlos Sastra gets the win. The clock has started.
Well, that's the clock starting there. 6 seconds already have gone by. He started the day 49 seconds behind his own teammate. Phil, at the last time check, we had about 2.5 minutes. This is Sammy Sanchez now riding to try and get himself second place, but this could, and he's still got a kilometre to go to the finish.
That's amazing. He out-climbed them by a kilometre and about 300 metres, and they all were level at the start of the climb. It's all about time now. Evans must reduce it. He is leaving himself just about enough time to take this race in the time trial. But you know, once you ride in yellow, you ride like 10 men. Andy Schleck deserves to ride away right now. He's chasing he's chasing Sammy Sanchez.
Well, he's ridden so defensively throughout the whole of the afternoon here. He comes up to the wheel of Sammy Sanchez. He wants to just sit there. He won't help him at all. 57, it's a minute has gone by already, so there's a change in the overall standings. Carlos Sastra will be the new leader tonight, but Phil, the important thing is, how much time will he have over Cadell Evans when we leave the Alps behind tomorrow?
Well, Sastra, Sammy Sanchez has eased a little bit. Schleck has got on at 500 metres. Schleck needs a few deep breaths if he's going to get something out of this. His brother won here last year. Schleck can finish second here this year, and CSC would take first and second after a day in which they have worked their hearts out. That would be a result.
It would be a phenomenal result here. Look at Andy Schleck. He's just waiting. Look at that face of concentration as he swings around here. He knows that 2 years ago, it was brother Frank who got the victory here, and he's trying to make it a 1-2. And look at the time gap. It's going to be more than 2 minutes by the time Cadell Evans...
They're all around the bottom corner, though, as Andy Schleck races for the line. Christian van der Velde looking for the fourth place finish, but Sammy Sanchez goes this time, takes on Schleck. I can't see where the line is now, but I would suspect that Schleck lost that to Sanchez. And here comes Cadell Evans fighting for time. They pull back a little bit, and the clock will stop on Evans. We're looking at the back of the line there. I would say at 2:15.
2 minutes and 15. Evans bows his head down there. He did everything he could, Phil, to reduce that gap deficit over the final kilometres. I tell you what, there's a lot of tired bodies in this bike race here this afternoon, but one will be celebrating in a yellow jersey, and that is Carlos Sastra. The question is, has he got enough time now to win the Tour de France? I'm still not sure.
Well, it's going to be touch and go. It's going to the last day. We always said it would. Roman Kreuziger, the winner of the Tour of Switzerland, comes home. Another man like Andy Schleck, who one day will return and we think win the Tour de France. He's won the Tour of Switzerland this year. He is a rider of terrific talent as well. We could name probably 10 guys this year of under the age of 25 who have the ability to win the Tours of the future.
Absolutely, he's battling here, and look at the time gaps, and we're going to have to wait a long time, Phil, to see the rest of Team CSC come in, because Stuart O'Grady is a long way from the finish line, but Stuart O'Grady is responsible in part for this victory with Nicky Sorensen, Fabian Cancellara, Kurt Adler-Arvidsson. They laid their souls out on the road today, Phil, for one thing, to get the victory and to get the yellow jersey. But did they get enough time? The question for me is still there.
It's still there for me too, Paul. 1 minute 10, 1:25 is probably the gap between Sastra and Evans. And I would think in the time trial, it's a hard time trial, he has a real chance to, it might be even better than that actually, might be about 1 minute 20. We're waiting for the official times to come up. It's going to go down to Saturday. There's the stage result. We can see that in fact we have in 7th place Cadell Evans, and he is at 2 minutes 15 looking across the road here. Van der Velde the same time, he's crossed the line 9th. Well, what a day on Alpe d'Huez, Andy. The Schleck boys rode a brilliant tour today, and it was thrilling to watch as they continue to come in. This is David Moncoutier now. He's on his his own this time as he races up to the line. The average for the day, just about 21.5 miles an hour over all of those mountains. As Moncoutier comes in at nearly 5 minutes behind, we know we have a new leader in the Tour, but we don't yet know if we have a Tour winner.